The Prince of Destruction awakes, born anew in blood and fire.
What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you something a little bit different because today we are talking about the Oblivion remake or remaster, which is getting an announcement like 4 hours after this video goes live, give or take, and honestly I thought about waiting and just covering the announcement itself, but due to some ongoing construction around my house, and some other plans that I already have in place for Wednesday, my schedule is a bit weird this week. So ultimately this got some official news and I finally wanted to talk about it. And I do plan on streaming and reviewing the actual game once it fully drops. But the Oblivion remake has been long rumored forever since it was mentioned in some leaked court documents way back when. And I have not really covered any of that on the channel because I do not enjoy covering leaks, which is why, then, the announcement of something official happening finally, which was, at least in part, I would say, due to all of the leaks that have been happening the past week, things kind of hit a fever pitch, so even if they aren't planning on actually dropping it, at some point you have to address it, or at the very least deny it, and seeing how they didn't deny it for years, it was kind of obvious where that was going. But all that boring stuff aside, I kind of wanted to take this video and talk about some of the things surrounding the remake, what I would like to see, of course, what to get addressed, and then, again, obviously going to review the actual game. But I know Oblivion so well, there's a lot to go over. And like a lot of other people, Oblivion meant a lot to me. In fact, if you watched my review of it that I put out last year, I talked about how I had played it during a particularly impactful time in my life. And because of that, in large part, it really is more than a game to me, and the opportunity then for other people to experience Oblivion in a way that is easier to get into for them is great. I hope that it pans out that way, but obviously with it being a game release in one form or fashion, that comes with the natural questions of, how does it run? What is the price of it, obviously, things like that. But the catch there is, a lot of what I enjoy about Oblivion is the janky, weird mess that it can sometimes be, and we're going to circle back to that here in a moment. Now, for the upcoming announcement here in about 4 hours, they've just announced basically that they are announcing what is about to happen in terms of Oblivion. There's been a lot of rumors that it's supposed to be shadow dropping, which I think is possible, and I would say there's probably two possibilities here. Either they have the announcement and it gets shadow dropped or released like immediately afterwards, and given that it's a Tuesday, that, would line up. Games often get released on Tuesday. But I do also think it's possible that in response to all the leaks that happened, they simply realized they had to say something. And it could be that they're just like, hey, yes, this is obviously a thing. Here's the date it's actually going to release. Now, probably my biggest question in terms of the announcement itself is this actually just a remaster or is it a proper remake? Because there's obviously been information about it launching in Unreal Engine 5 or whatever. And from some of the leaks, it has been seemingly massively overhauled in terms of graphical fidelity. And they've even mentioned that they've changed some of the sort of core systems that have aged less than well. So I think I'll be especially interested in learning about that stuff myself. But the two big things I wanted to talk about in relation to that are just, can they manage to thread the needle of making this game easier to play, so to speak, from a gameplay perspective, as some of the systems are less than great, even as somebody who loves that game. Its leveling system is like the main thing people talk about because it was pretty bad. Which is funny because it was just a variation of other systems they had used up to that point, but the tweaks they made for Oblivion really kind of got in the way of the rest of the game. But can they make those changes while still retaining the core of what the game is? And on top of that, how do you make a game that is simultaneously something that actually runs well, but also maintains the charm and oddities that were Oblivion? I feel like a lot of what worked about Oblivion was precisely because of just how strange and sort of mishmashed some of its systems were. And that's even down to things like the weird voice acting, voice actors being honestly spread a little too thin. Wes Johnson's great, but I'd like to hear some more people, But for me, can they sort of reimagine some of this stuff or update it, I guess, while also retaining that core identity? But I also just talked about voice actors there. That's another thing I'm really curious how they'll approach. Because on one hand, I really would love for them to use a lot of the original sounds and audio, but if you've actually played Oblivion anytime recently, you'll probably realize that a lot of that stuff is rough. It came back in 2006, and to be honest with you, even the voice clip I pulled to put at the beginning of this video sounds a little odd in comparison to anything today. And that becomes just a sort of another question that I have, where it's like, how do you update that stuff and try to bring it back to life, if at all? Or even as to what I mentioned earlier, there's really not a lot of voice actors in Oblivion. And it does get a bit noticeable after a while, and because of the radiant conversations those NPCs can have, it's not uncommon to hear like two characters with the same voice actor talking to each other. Do you hire some extra voice actors just to mix up the voices that you hear? That is to say, you could assign different actors to less consequential NPCs that people don't necessarily remember much. Do you see if any of those voice actors would like to re-record some stuff, update it, make it sound a little more modern just in terms of recording equipment and everything? There's a lot of avenues they could go there, basically, and I'm genuinely curious to see how they wind up handling that. Now, the other thing I sort of wanted to mention here is simply, what does the price and DLC situation of this game look like? Now, I would assume that they are going to put all the DLC in with it and sell it as a complete game and go from there. But obviously, with today's modern marketing, let's call it, it would not surprise me if there were like some sort of pre-order situation, that kind of thing. And then there's, again, just how much the game is actually priced at. Personally, as it's a remaster of an old game, as much as I love it, I'd really prefer to see it at like $50. But given how it's almost certainly going to day one on Game Pass, when it does come out, I'm going to guess that's probably going to be more than that. And while I personally would happily pay like $200-$300 for a collector's edition of it just because I love the game, but I also don't think that would be good for the entirety of the market, so to speak. But given how crazy everything else is in the world at the moment, $70 is pretty much what I'm expecting. Since that's what they seem to do with games coming out on Game Pass, they'll put the actual game at a slightly higher price than it probably would have been in the past, with the sort of sidestep of it being available on Game Pass, which is theoretically cheaper. And when I start putting all of that stuff together, I kind of want to mention that that is the stuff that I have in mind for the actual review of this when it comes out and when I get to it. Probably unsurprisingly, does this manage to capture what the original is while updating and changing the things you would want it to update and change, the leveling system being the core one? And obviously there, I hope the answer is yes, but I'm obviously also going to be a bit biased. Which brings me to another point, and that is that Oblivion is a game that's really important to me because of the time in which I played it, because as I've mentioned previously in videos, I was homeless at 15 and it was a rough time. And my point there being that as much as I love the game, I simply associate it with a bad time of my life. And the opportunity to play a game I love that is a different version of that I can make new memories with at a better point in my life is an exciting prospect to me. And I hope then that other people can see what I saw in this game all those years ago and still do in a way that allows them to be brought into the fold. Now, hopefully, the surrounding aspects of any release, like, the price, the DLC, one has to assume there's going to be a horse armor joke in there somewhere. Is all of that stuff on the level? Because when it comes time to review it, my own nostalgia goggles aside, I have an obligation to show a game for what it is and not what I want it to be in my heart. So, if it has problems, if there's anything that I think doesn't work, did it lose the charm of the original, things like that, that's all going to be stuff that I mention in a review. But that little part of me that's still filled with childlike wonder about video games really, really hopes this is something special. And I'm excited to find out about that together with people. So to reiterate here at the end, again, I'm absolutely going to review this, obviously. And whenever it releases, be that here in a few hours or at some future date, I absolutely plan on streaming it, at least the first part, just to kind of hang out with people and share that. Now, if it actually does shadow drop today, it won't be until later in the evening because I have things I have to do. And I'd also like to make sure I've got it up and running and working properly first. And then following that, I'll kind of see if I want to make any follow-up content about it. Either way, though, we don't have much longer to wait in terms of actual information to come out, and I appreciate everybody letting me sit here and ramble on this one. I think it'll be fun to see how much of this pans out on my end, as I am certainly hoping for the best. But for this video, I think that's as good a place as any to wrap it up. I certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Obviously, more content on this on the way, but regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.